Hello there and a very warm welcome to another exciting edition of the program. I'm Victor Matthias. Now in 2005, Nigeria successfully negotiated a complicated debt write-off deal of about $18 billion after a cash payment of approximately $12 billion to free the nation from the Paris Club debts of over $30 billion, most of which were accumulated interests and charges. A huge chunk of the loans was secured in the 1980s to fund what turned out to be white elephant projects. However, recently the Senate rejected a request by the federal government to borrow $30 billion, and that's our focus on the program today. But let's first take a look at the trending topics in the past week. Another Chibok girl was rescued from the clutches of terror group Boko Haram, and Nigerians wasted no time to celebrate her return and give kudos to the troops of the Nigerian army who rescued the girl alongside her 10-month-old baby. And while Nigerians were still basking in the euphoria of the rescue, news broke that the terror group gunned down a newly decorated Lieutenant Colonel, Muhammad Abu Ali, during an ambush on 119 Battalion Nigerian Army located at Malam Fatori in northern Borno State. And on a lighter note, current and former government officials, including presidents, were all in Sokoto State to witness the Sokoto Durbar, organized to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Sultan of Sokoto, Muhammad Saad Abakar III, on the throne. And those were the trends in the past week, but let's now join our contributors via the Google Plus Hangout.
Let me start by saying that the fiscal challenges that the government of the day has had to go through, starting from the fall in oil prices and the associated fall in government's revenues, there's an obvious need for the government to try to plug in the revenue sources by some kind of borrowing. You could say that there might be a need to borrow, you understand? But of course, there are challenges with regard to public disclosure of the funds are going to be used for, both in terms of the amount, which is 30 billion, which many people, including myself, think is so high, and also in terms of the usage of these funds and how well the government of the day is going to manage the use of those resources in terms of utilization and repayment. So those are the concerns that need to be addressed by the government of the day in terms of utilization of the funds. Sourced, where the money will be deployed, and how the money is going to be repaid. Those are the questions that many Nigerians, including myself, have about the amount that is going to be raised, that the government intends to raise. And we are looking forward to getting more clarification from the government before we can begin to go into deeper analysis. But for now, we don't have much details on this. So for now, we need more information.
The funds are, in my opinion, are very much needed, considering the insufficient revenue to finance the deficit of the budget. There's a recession going on. There's increase in economic inactivity, the demographic factors. If you talk about this whole Niger Delta and the Northwest, we need funds to cushion this thing, infrastructure amongst other things. We are generating money now from non-oil sector. There's a need to enhance or facilitate means that we can easily generate these funds and boost up economic activities, but there's also a need for the government to clearly explain to Nigerians how it intends to source these funds and what is the payment plan of these funds.
All right, Yaya, you made mention of non-oil sources. Can you expatiate on this?
Yeah, I think one of the main sources of this internally generated revenue, we should give a very big credit to the FIRS, the Nigerian Custom Service also. They contribute a lot to most of these funds. They are mainly internally generated taxes, amongst other means that we generate this money. The nature of where this internally generated money are gotten from other than the oil revenue is not clear-cut, but there is a percentage of between 60 to 65 for the last 2-3 months. We have been generating that amount internally, which is a step in the right direction. And also, I will like to talk more about this whole lending issue. I think most governments lend money for various reasons. Probably one, to cushion the deficit, automatic physical stabilizers in times of recession. There's investment also, government borrow for short-term investment. And there's political reasons, which is the most widely acclaimed reason why government borrow. The current government that is heading Nigeria today has promised a lot to Nigerians. And Nigerians have never at any point in time demanded for responsiveness and representation from their governments like they are today. We are very much aware of the need to be represented. So this political pressure to meet up the demands of the Nigerians, I think it is one of the main reasons why they want to borrow this money. Not like we don't need it, we do need it, but the pressure politically, other than the automatic physical stabilizers to cushion the recession, it is the main reason. Because if you are borrowing money to cushion a recession, there's a need. The Minister of Finance should clearly go to the House of Assembly and defend this this intention to borrow money. This is where we are sourcing it from. Do with it, but this is sketchy. There is no information about this, and the National Assembly was right to dismiss this notion, in my opinion.
All right, so a lot has been said by this administration about the diversification of the economy. Have you seen any indication that the country is moving in that direction?
If you're living in a place like Abuja, Lagos, you experience some of these. Some of these are northerners. So once it's dry season, they all come out to take on manual jobs like Okada driving, pushing keke and the rest of them. Once it's rainy season, they go back to the farm to farm sugarcane and other things. It's because there have been lack of government presence in the kind of business that they are doing. If you actually invest very well in agriculture, in terms of sugarcane farming, in terms of palm front farming, in terms of cocoa, we have a lot of tomatoes and the rest of them. We will be able to produce enough food that we can consume ourselves. Once we are okay with what we consume, we can be able to export.
Before we can really begin to talk about how to revolutionize the agricultural sector, we need to talk about the Land Use Act and how much of a stumbling block the Land Use Act is in revolutionizing the agricultural sector. I want to talk about it from the perspective of ownership of land, for example, whereas in other serious countries you have private ownership of land where you don't need to go through the entire process of obtaining governor's consent before you can transfer property from one person to the other. In Nigeria, ownership and management of land is in the hands of the government, and at best you can only hold land for a 99-year lease. That in itself is a disincentive for private sector investment, because a private sector operator who wants to invest in large-scale farming projects will always have to factor in the risk that his land can be taken and expropriated by any government agency at any point in time making use of the Land Use Act. So the first thing we need to do, get rid of the Land Use Act, have a land use system that confers proper private ownership of land in the hands of private individuals and guarantees private property rights. When that is done, then we can begin to talk about how to incentivize investment in the agricultural sector, how to help farmers become large-scale landowners, for instance. Those conversations can follow from the reform of the management of our land use system, which has to follow from the Land Use Act.
I think we are moving in that direction because we are clearly not generating this revenue from oil. It means we are generating it internally. And I'm very sure on the Bureau of Statistics, there should be a data on the amount generated from each sector that is being remitted to the government account. Because what this administration did, I think they have one general account where all government revenues are being deposited. So there should be like a statistics which the public can go through and scrutinize. I think we can find such information on the Bureau of Statistics website.
A lot of people will argue that such borrowings in the past has not ended so well for the country, and some are of the opinion that history is again about to repeat itself. Speaking in terms of utilizing the funds judiciously, do you agree with this assertion?
Yes, thank you. I do. You know, in fact, the issues behind the last major debt crisis we had, that was, you know, the debts that were paid off during the Obasanjo administration. Those are the kind of things that inform my own personal belief that we should have as minimal government as possible in terms of the economy and in the management of resources. Now, many of the things that the government intends to borrow this money to do, or the projects they intend to execute, are projects that in better organized economies can be carried out by the private sector, to be honest. We don't need to have government invest in a railway or in a pipeline or in any of those infrastructural projects if we had the right policy environment that could attract private sector investment in all of these areas. That's the first point I want to make. And the reason why why in the past we accumulated this huge debts in doing all of these projects is because the government is a poor manager, has always shown itself, at least in this part of the world, to be a poor manager of resources. So you have a situation where the government borrows to construct a dam or borrows to construct a road, spends more than it should on that road, and then at the end of the day, it secures a huge debt burden. And you know, either the project is not executed or part of the money is looted and not utilized properly. And then the government, subsequent governments, carry that debt burden and they have to pay it.
Well, as regards the budget, clearly some months back, the finance minister did come out and explain that the budget, items on the budget are going to be given priorities. Not necessarily, the government is not necessarily going to finance all the proposals on the budget or the policies because it doesn't have the money to finance this. And as regards transparency of this nature of this loan, regardless of whether we are borrowing it to invest in a private, in agriculture or infrastructure, these loans are usually accompanied by stringent conditions like job cuts, you know, retrenchment, among other factors. And there's a need also to clearly explain to Nigerians the sources, like I earlier stated, and how it is intended to be utilized. While this loan can infuse economic growth, it can also set us back economically, because this debt is not necessarily going to be paid by the government of the day. It may be paid 100 years later. So we don't know the nature of this debt and the source of it. There's a need for the government to explain to Nigeria. But do we need this money in this economy? Yes, we do need it. There's just a need for further clarification as to the source of payment and the source of the loan and how the payments should be made.
So what should the government be doing moving forward?
Before we go borrowing, we should look at how much we are owing, because currently right now, our debt profile stands about $64 billion. And what are we borrowing for? Do we need the money like the last speaker said? Yes, we need the money. Every government needs money to run its daily activity. And currently we have a huge gap of infrastructural deficit in the country. But at the same time, when we look at the money that has been borrowed in the past, what have those money been used for? Or I mean, currently we can't see anything tangible. Anything tangible that we can say, look, we can hold on to and say the money that has been borrowed from the past, this is what we have done with it. But all I can advise the government is before they want to borrow, before they go out to borrow any money, they should be able to come out and tell Nigerians what they will use this money for and how are we going to pay back this money. Because once you owe anybody, you become a slave to them. When we are owing all these countries, we become a slave to them. They begin to have some kind of say in our own policy. We can't drive our own economy the way we want. They will always have something to say because we are owing them. And we can't say much. They dictate to us what to do and what not to do.
First, they need to get their house in order in terms of finances, in terms of public disclosure of utilization of government funds. There has been a steady decline of transparency on the part of this government that needs to be worked upon. And we need a clear and comprehensive plan on getting Nigeria out of the recession, backed by a plan to reduce the size of the government and get the private sector into the economy as they should.
All right, guys, thanks for joining us today, but we have to leave the conversation here and take a quick break. And when we return, experts are proffering solutions on how the government can raise funds using technology this time around, speaking specifically about the Internet of Things. Join us again.